As Pat alluded to, Lloyd is going to be speaking about the transmutation of baked Alaska. We're used to hearing weird or stupid ideas, probably because there are lots of weird or stupid people around. And because the internet makes it so easy for weird or stupid ideas to spread. However, now and then we hear a completely stupid idea that is nonetheless sensible if you look at it in a certain way. This evening, Lloyd Smith will discuss one of those ideas in the second speech in the Evaluation and Feedback Project for Level 1 of the Engaging Humor Path. Please help me welcome Lloyd Smith and Baked Alaska.
In the mid to late 1950s, the Atomic Energy Commission had a really serious public relations problem. It had only been about 15 years since the nuclear attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and they realized that for some odd reason, most Americans thought that nuclear weapons were dangerous. So in order to make nukes warm and fuzzy, they launched a two-part public relations effort. The first part was fairly trivial. They commissioned Walt Disney Studios to produce a book and an animated movie called My Friend the Atom. Cute little characters looking kind of like atomic nuclei. It talked about the glorious future we were going to have with nukes, including free electricity and atomic-powered cars in every garage. I remember seeing that book in my school library when I was about in 4th or 5th grade because they sent free copies of it to every school in the country in an effort to promote the idea of nuclear power. The second element of their PR campaign was much more serious. A guy named Dr. Edward Teller, who's regarded as the father of the hydrogen bomb, dreamed up something called Project Plowshares. The name comes from the biblical injunction to beat swords into plowshares for peaceful purposes. The basic idea was to use atomic bombs as construction tools. For example, you could suddenly widen the Panama Canal with 100 well-placed hydrogen bombs. In fact, you could dig an entirely new canal across Nicaragua with 175 hydrogen bombs. Now, when foreign countries got wind of what they were thinking about, they declined the invitation to have nuclear construction projects on their land. So the Atomic Energy Commission switched its focus to projects entirely within the United States. 3 of those projects actually got far into the planning stage. One of them was called Project Carryall. That was a plan to use 50 nuclear bombs to blast a path through a mountain range called the Bristol Mountains near the Mojave Desert. The idea was to change the route of the Santa Fe Railroad to avoid mountain passes, and also to create a gap that the Interstate 40 freeway that was in the process of being built could go through. Another one was called Project 10 Tom, and that was a plan to use 50 hydrogen bombs to help dig a 250-mile-long canal connecting the Tennessee and Tombigbee rivers in northeastern Mississippi. Those 2 didn't get as far as the third project, which came very close to being implemented. That was Project, Project Chariot, which was a plan to use 6 hydrogen bombs to dig a deep water port near Cape Thompson, Alaska. Now, when the people in Alaska heard that plan, they were puzzled because Cape Thompson juts out into the Arctic Ocean, and for at least 4 months out of every year it's frozen solid in sea ice. In addition, there are no railroad lines or highways to connect the port up with anything, so there'd be no way to move the cargo that came into the port down to the rest of the United States. But those weren't objections enough for the Atomic Energy Commission and Dr. Teller, who was desperate to have one of the projects done so that the concept would catch on. Now, the people of Alaska were somewhat reluctant to take on the idea of 6 hydrogen bombs going off in there. But back then it wasn't a state, it was still a territory. And there were people there who actually wanted the project to happen. Most of them lived far away from Cape Thompson, and they had in mind making money off the federal government that would be spending a ton of it during this. Ordinary Alaskans didn't want to do it, and most scientists in the US didn't want to do it either because they remembered what had happened in 1954 when the first hydrogen bombs were tested in the South Pacific. The former residents of Bikini Atoll had been told that they could quickly move back to their homes after the testing was done because there wasn't going to be any kind of a problem. In reality, the first blast of a hydrogen bomb was 3 times as powerful as it was predicted to be. And it contaminated 7,000 square miles with almost an inch of fallout, radioactive fallout. The people on Bikini Atoll were told, sorry, you're never going to go back to your homes because the radiation level is too high. And in fact, today, the radiation level there is triple what it is in Chernobyl, even though 70 years have gone by. Now, the people in Alaska also knew what had happened in 1962 during a blast at the Nevada test site about 75 miles northwest of Las Vegas. There was a project called SEDAN, and the idea was to find out how efficient a nuclear blast would be at moving Earth. When they set off the 100 kiloton bomb that was buried underground, the good news is that 12 million cubic yards of soil were instantly displaced. The bad news is that the radioactive plume of dust rose 20,000 feet into the air and drifted toward the Mississippi River, dropping fallout the entire way. At that point, Project Chariot was shelved. There was just too much opposition and nobody believed they could do it without endangering everybody for thousands of miles around. Now, we all know that there was never a construction project using nuclear weapons in the United States, but there were 27 test blasts conducted in Nevada as part of all of this. It produced a tremendous amount of fallout and wasted $2 billion in federal money. The public just wouldn't go for the idea of baking Alaska or anywhere else for a construction project using thermonuclear weapons. But I think Time magazine summed it up perfectly in 1977 when the Pentagon and the Atomic Energy Commission finally canceled Project Plowshare. Time said it should have been called Project Dubious.